Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to this month's webinar, Fresh Starts, Reigniting Donor Relationships. My name is Christine Kim, and I am the project coordinator for the Fundraising Academy. I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, a couple of notes. The webinar will be conversational with the opportunity to ask questions during, as well as a 30-minute Q&A following the presentation. Please submit any questions you have in the Q&A option within your Zoom controls. The chat function can also be used during a community shares where you may share your ideas with all the attendees. Closed captioning is available for this webinar. To enable the setting, click the CC option in your Zoom controls. Caption size can be adjusted in the video settings under accessibility. In the days following the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to access the slide deck and recording to review again at your. You've got a cause, learn how to fund it. At Fundraising Academy Cause Selling Education, we enhance fundraiser skills so they can develop and sustain donor relationships to advance them in today's growing landscape through a proven contemporary curriculum presented by world-class nonprofit fundraising leaders. We want to recognize our important affiliate partners who provide training and education to fundraisers nationally. Check out the map to find an institute in your community. Now, I am very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Lenise Andrade, Senior Philanthropy Officer for the San Diego Botanic Garden. Lenise has over 19 years of experience as a nonprofit fundraiser with a variety of organizations, including Heal the Bay, the San Diego Zoo, UC San Diego, and California Center for the Arts Escondido. She is a Senior Philanthropy Officer at San Diego Botanic Garden and has led workshops on nonprofit management, fundraising, and leadership for Association of Fundraising Professionals San Diego, the Fundraising Academy, Nonprofit Solutions, and even more area organizations. Lenise has also consulted a variety of organizations in development strategy, major donor fundraising, board development, and nonprofit communications. She is a founding board member of the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network in San Diego, serves on the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee for Catalyst San Diego and Imperial Counties, and is a founding member of Women Give San Diego. Welcome, Lenise. Thank you so much for being here. You all good there, Lenise?
Oh, hi, yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Christine, and welcome to everyone here with the Fundraising Academy. I'm so excited to talk about, this is one of my favorite subjects ever and my favorite part of fundraising, getting to know donors. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about this.
And yes, as you can see, just to get started, we'd like to start off with a poll just to kind of gauge the audience here with us today. So I will be launching a poll on your screen. It is, how many years of fundraising experience do you have? And options are 0 to 3 years, 4 years, over years, or you could be a volunteer fundraiser or board member joining. So if you could please select one of the options on your screen. Alrighty, I will close the poll now. And Lenise, can you see the results?
Yes, we have a good mix of people. And this is one of the things that I love most about Fundraising Academy and this work is seeing that we have a good chunk of people who are new-ish to the field. And thank you so much for powering through and joining this amazing group. And then those in a nice good mid-range of 4 to 10 years. Yeah, it's about a third, and kind of a third. And thank you to the volunteers and board members joining us today. You are so important, and I doubly appreciate you taking the time to learn a bit more about fundraising because it is essential to your board role. All right, let's get started. Hold on a second. We seem to be having a little technical issue. All right, can everybody see that?
It doesn't look like we can on our end.
Hold on, I'll be back in a second. All right, how about that?
Yes, we are now seeing your screen.
All right, we're back. Just a brief technical issue. Hopefully that's the last one for the day. All right,
just so keeping everyone on their toes.
Exactly. Fundraising 101. So I just wanted, again, to thank everyone for being here today. And these are some of the objectives we'll be covering today, is learning how to set yourself up for a successful meeting. And that's part of the pre-approach process that we talk about here at Fundraising Academy. We're also going to review how to leverage your CRM database. And I just want to say, whatever state your database is in, that is the state it's in, and there are still ways to pull the information you need. But we'll also talk about how to add to it and to make sure it has the information that is useful to you for you to do your job efficiently. We're going to also talk about some components of a successful outreach. It says phone call here. We also know that nowadays phone call can also mean Zoom, porch visits, what have you. So we'll try and be flexible. And we're also going to talk about ways to determine what donors are really thinking. And one of the reasons that I want to do this presentation today is that this is my favorite part of fundraising, is getting to know donors and getting involved with them. And just for a little background as to where I'm at currently. So I joined the team at the San Diego Botanic Garden in February, and obviously we were still working from home since then. And so I've been doing a lot of the background work that you do at the beginning of any job, of getting to know our lists, our database, our files, our programs, what's currently up, what been paused because of the pandemic, what did we do all of 2020. And then I have only been on site for about a month. And so I've been using that as a strategy for my outreach for donors. And what I've been doing is being honest in that a lot of our donors and volunteers, a lot of our donors are volunteers, have been with the organization 20 plus years, whereas I've been here 5 months, and even my CEO's only been here 3 years. So the donors are the institutional memory of the organization. And so my outreach has been based on asking them to tell me what the garden is and does for them. And so that's been my way of making them the expert of this area. There's an old adage of if you want advice, ask for money. And if you want money, ask for advice. So I'm asking our donors their advice on how to get to know more about the garden. And they are telling me a wealth of information about themselves, about the organization, about its place in the community. And this is one tactic that we're going to dive deep into today, because frankly, all of us are the new girls right now. We're the new kids on the block, because 2020 was a world of change. And our organizations went through a ton of change, and our donors went through a ton of change. And so we're having to reintroduce ourselves to each other. And so that's why this focus is called Fresh Starts. We're going to have to start fresh in a lot of ways, of re-engaging our donors, finding out what happened to them in the last year, good, bad. Their priorities may have changed, their interest in purpose and passion, their interest in a legacy gift. may be more prominent to them. And then our organizations have gone through change. We may have gone through budget cuts. We may have shifted programs. Some programs may have paused. We have to reintroduce ourselves to our donors. And so that's the threat of what we're going to talk about today. So figuring out who you're reaching out to. So regardless of your role within the organization, whether you're focused on major gifts, grants, or corporate gifts, or membership, you have some form of a list. And in order to pull that list and create that list and make it a manageable list, you also have to look at how you prioritize that list. And so one of the parts of pre-approach is really looking at how do you prioritize which donors you reach out to and in what way. So the saying goes is that, you know, a major gift is based on asking the right person at the right time for the right amount. And that's what pre-approach is about. Who are your right people? What is the right approach? What is the right area of interest? And what are their amounts? And those are the kinds of information that ideally should be in your database. As you're prepping, also look at what's coming down the pike on your calendar of your organization. Are there any events coming up? Do you have new exhibitions starting in the fall? Are your education programs starting their field trips again, or outreach to local community groups? And then what are your long-term goals for the organization that may have shifted or reprioritized in 2020? And because you're going to have to start planting those seeds with donors now. And just having those talking points for each area, the bite-sized information at the ready will be helpful as you reach out to different people. And then looking at what are your different buckets of interest, which donors are event people and give mainly through your events, which people mainly are growing in their membership if you have a membership program, and what is maybe their areas of interest. Regardless of the size of your organization, people are going to be interested in very specific parts of your programs. And then how is that being checked? So pre-approach is all about the preparation. And for those of you who are new to the Fundraising Academy, this cycle is our cause filing cycle. And what this does is really, I just really want to emphasize at this point, is that this is showing that only about 10% of our time is spent on the actual ask. If we do our job right, if we plan, if we prepare, if we ask the right questions, that's the first half of our approach to the actual ask. And then the rest is just donor engagement before and after the ask. So really understanding how much of our work is around understanding our programs and understanding our people and how they align. And so hopefully for those of you who are new to the field and still feel a little nervous when it comes to the actual ask, believe me, I still feel butterflies sometimes when I ask that question. Just knowing that the better prepared you are, the easier it will be, because it's about building a relationship and this being an ongoing conversation with your donors. So going to your donor base, this is your database. And again, keep in mind, I have talked to and encountered easily 40 different databases in my work experience, and everyone will complain that theirs is the worst and that it has the least information and prepares them for nothing. But you have some of this stuff in here, but I'm going to drill down why some of these details are important. So full name and nickname. Nicknames are key for historically older couples. I know a couple that go by Bud and Gingy, and when they give to organizations, that's what they fill out in their paperwork. But if they get a blank or a piece of mail from an organization they don't know, it's addressed to William and Virginia, and they know that organization does not know them well enough. So having their nicknames, if they like using their nicknames, is key. Email address and street address. So one thing that happened during the pandemic at the Garden, which was a plus for us, is we had to start using a online reservation system, even if you were a member, which meant that everyone had to put in an email, which was great for capturing emails, but that system, of course, did not talk to our database. So our membership team has been trying to make sure and match all of the emails we got through that system to our actual members and donors. And it's been a process, but it has been key to my outreach to know which email address to use when I'm reaching out. Same thing with couples. If you have a couple, you have to know who's the primary person involved with your organization, because it's not always the person writing the check. So those are things that you need to know and have some way to mark that in your system. Phone number, of course, is key, but also knowing, is it a landline, is it a work number, or is it a cell phone? A lot of donors are getting into texting now, and it's not just younger donors either. I regularly text with an old board member who's over 70 years old. So don't assume anything. So it's just best to have as much information as you can. Name of their employer, which can be helpful because corporate giving right now is much more tied to the people within the organization, especially the higher up they are. So, and then also a key name of their employer is important if you're doing a matching gift, and can promote that towards the year end if their company does that. And then of course their family information, their spouse, the number of children. Another thing that happened a lot in 2020, and that's important to note in here, children moving back home or staying back home because they couldn't go to school in person during the pandemic. Those details are important because if suddenly a couple you work with now has their children and grandchildren in the house, their family dynamics have changed immensely in the past year. Could be a good plus if you work for a children's museum. Could be hard if your person used to also be a really good volunteer and be on site on a regular basis. You know, he or she might not have the time. So these are just details to keep in mind. Of course, you want demographic information as you can capture it. Age, even just within the decade is a helpful. Gender, depending on your organization, you know, the ability to mark non-binary, trans, you know, all those details can be helpful as well. Religion is key depending on your community as well as your approach. I have worked a lot in nature and conservation and environmental work. And I've worked with a lot of faith-based givers through that role because they believe that part of their strength in God and their giving back to their faith is to give back to God's creatures. And so that's a very different conversation than I would have with someone who's a little more liberal and wants to take on the man and worry about, you know, oil drilling and such. Those are two people with the same intention, but very different tactics. So that's where religion can come into play, regardless of your organization's background. Personal information, clubs, memberships, colleges. Clubs and memberships are key, especially if you live in a community that has very active Rotaries and chambers of commerce, and you need to know the difference. I worked in Escondido here in San Diego, which is not a big town, and it had 5 different Rotary clubs. And if you mentioned the wrong Rotary club to that person, they would be offended because they needed you to know that they were at the Sunrise Rotary and not the downtown Rotary. Same thing with colleges, right? University of Texas people would be horrified if you made a mistake and thought that they went to ATM. So these are things that really make a difference to people and their personal affiliation. So knowing them is important. Projected giving capacity. So if you're lucky enough to be in an organization that has a wealth screening tool, that's fabulous. That can do it for you. But even if you just have giving history on a spreadsheet, you can start to see some traction and some strategy and paths that someone's moving their membership up, or their amounts have stayed about 500, but then there was a sudden spike. Just looking at that can really tell you how much people give annually, and then give you sort of a benchmark of what the next ask should be. A source of a prospect, if that person was brought in by a board member or a fellow donor or a volunteer, that is important to have in the notes. So you can say when you reach out, oh, I just saw Bob the other day, made me think of you, and I just wanted to see how you were doing. You know, having those personal touches make a huge difference. And then their known philanthropic interests. More than anything, people who are donors are donors. People can be rich and not give a dime to anybody, let's be honest. So knowing that our donors are philanthropic in other areas is not only okay, it's great to have conversations with them about. They want to talk about the causes they care about. And it also, I think, reflects well on you if you're not only ever always talking about your own organization. All right. So
I
as
also have a clarifying question, Lenise, just to borrow for 1 second. But someone asked, how do you get all this information without being too invasive?
well, some of it you can be blunt, right? So some of it be like, oh, I was just at the Encinitas chamber last night. Are you part of a chamber group as well? So you can casually ask. I think 2020 made people a lot more open. So, a lot of times I'll share my own personal information. I am an open book. So, I can mention, oh yeah, my cousin had to move back in with her parents this last year because times were tight. How's your family faring during all of this? Or sometimes you don't even have to ask the question, even just casually mention an experience you've had that is similar or refers to one of these demographic issues can cause them to bring up that information. That people are a lot more open than you realize. And again, we'll get to towards the end, but asking more open-ended questions, of ways that they are involved in the community, what their family situation is, it can lead to much more of a hearty conversation than you'd think. Do we have anything else, Christine?
It looks like that's it for now. But yes, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to add them to our Q&A.
Just real quick before I go on to the next thing, donors know who they're talking to. Like this is also their job, right? So like they'll share what they feel comfortable sharing. The point is to make them feel comfortable. So don't worry that you're prying too much, because if they don't want to answer the question, they won't answer the question. So, but the purpose of some of these leading open-ended questions, and the reason that I'm so open, is that they feel comfortable being open with their lives as well. So it's a two-way street in my mind, and that's my way of getting to know my donors a little more personally. All right, so your list. If you're so I have about 120 people on my list and corporate partners. And one of the things that I do is review that list on a regular basis, and to make sure that I am prioritizing my people into what we call A, B, and C prospects. And so your A people you can spend a little more time with. The B and C you just want to make sure that you're staying in touch with one way or another, or finding ways to feed your list as you go. So I want to say for this first bullet about looking at who to prioritize right now during this time, looking at donors who have renewed or given steadily in the last 3 years, even if there hasn't been an increase. Right now, retention is growth. Even before the pandemic, organizations were looking at a 48-49% annual retention. So that means half of our donors were not returning the following year. So if you have donors who are returning 3 years plus, that is great. That is wonderful. Those are the people that you want to pay attention to. And looking at those who have suddenly spiked, in reviewing my list for the Botanic Garden, we had people who were steady 200, 300 level memberships, and then gave 500 at the year-end appeal. And that tells me, A, they have more capacity than we've approached, and they care about our organization enough to give us that much more on top of their membership. So having that understanding of the numbers and looking at those numbers more steadily and with an idea, and I would say even go 5 years back. I mean, honestly, the economy was sort of up and down, the couple of years up into the pandemic. Giving was not necessarily steady. So pulling 5 years, I think, would be worthwhile if you can have that information. Look at reactivated donors. We had a lot of that with the garden too. We had donors who moved to Texas and then still donated at the year end. So, people still felt connected to us, and that was huge. Even if it wasn't a big amount, it was the fact that they gave at all. And those are the people I'm reaching out to. And then any new donors. you may have. And this has a $500 amount. And this, I get asked this all the time. So I did major gifts consulting for many organizations, and they would regularly ask me, what is a major gift? And the answer is, it depends on your organization. So the answer I always gave is you pull your list for your cumulative donors, by cumulative amount in the last 5 years, and the last 5, and then you sort, and the top 100 people are your top, that's your major giving level. And it will start to actually have a pattern, which is what's interesting, is you'll start to see that there's a mark, and maybe it's a little over or under 100. And for us, it ended up being $1,000 is our major gifts benchmark. But I'm still paying attention to $500 donors because I'm looking at moving them up the pipeline. And so, be thinking of those numbers. What is the benchmark number for your organization? It may be $100. Those are still people you need to pay attention to, because the idea is to grow them into the next level. And so look at the way that your donors are giving, and these are your main people that you're going to be paying attention to. For B and C prospects, it's a matter of trying to figure out how are you going to feed your pipeline? What are additional people that you can add as you go? So one way, of course, is to do a zip code sort based on the wealthier zip codes in your area. And so that's something that if you're in a smaller community, you probably know what the zip codes and addresses and streets are. For a larger metropolitan city, you can also look that up from census data. And so tracking what zip codes are the popular or the wealthier zip codes in your area are what you can pull from your database, and then start looking for higher level members of donors in those zip codes. You can also look at frequent ticket buyers, and by this we also don't just mean your annual fundraiser. If you have an exhibit, if you have any regular events, we just started doing summer concerts for kids, kid shows. Anybody who's buying every ticket to those things is someone who's regularly coming in. So one thing I always say when you're looking at lists is to not just pull for amount, but pull for longevity. Who has been participating with your organization for years, even if it seems like a lower level. Those are people who care about your organization enough to keep coming back. And the more you engage them, the more likely that amount will go up. High bidders, this is about for your fundraising event. And this drives me crazy. I know the drive is to go to mobile platforms for auctions and online platforms to do those. And those are great, they're wonderful. And believe me, if it saves you the time, use it. But please make sure that they're also giving you all the information on the back end of who bid, not just who won. Because if I look at a silent auction list and I see that out of 50 items, John Smith bid on 30 at $500 each time, and even though he didn't win, that tells me that John Smith has no problem spending a couple $1,000s in a night just for fun. So the bidding amounts, and also people may be guests of your donors. They may not even be in your system yet. So you need to know whose guest that person was. Who is John Smith? Who did he come with? What table did he sit at? And get to know John Smith better, because this person is obviously willing to spend a little money. And then anyone who opted to make a donation for your website. This has been another plus in the pandemic of our organization being having online reservations, is tickets to the garden are $18 each. So you make a reservation for 2 people for $36. And then we added the add a donation option. We had people adding $50, $100, $250 on top of just their $36 attendance. And so those are also people that I'm making a priority to reach out to, because they obviously not only have the capacity to drop a couple $100s for a daytime event, they also know that we're a nonprofit organization and they want us to stay open, and they feel that our programs are worthwhile. And so being able to track that and keep an eye on that, and even if it's just having someone on staff, but that's what we're doing right now. One of my staff members just forwards me those online registration emails where he sees a notable donation, and we're just tracking. It's not a great system yet. Again, we're rebuilding as well. But if you have some sort of way to track that internally, that's helpful. So again, as we're going through your pre-approach with your donors, really looking at, do you know who drives the philanthropic decisions? You know, when you're dealing, especially with a donor couple, is it something that, you know, the check may come from the husband, but the involvement is really from the wife. And there's that line from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the husband is the head, but the wife is the neck. And I see that with a lot of couples, and it's not necessarily those genders or no, you know, those roles really, but there's always someone who's the neck. And you know, is it the daughter? Are they grooming the next generation to take over their family foundation? You know, do they want them to be more involved in the decision making? So know who your lead people are. Understand their giving history with your organization. Again, tracking, you know, I've got 20 plus years on some of my donors of and in some cases just numbers. I mean, really, our database is not necessarily better than others either. So, but even just knowing the amounts is a huge importance. Their personal interests, so not just within your organization. I mean, if you're an arts organization and you find out that your person really loves to garden, I will tell you, gardens often have art, and then that's a nice day away with your donor. You know, it's not just about your organization. And the more that you show that you have interest in them, the more they will trust you and feel supported, and that you're not just trying to pitch them. Again, looking at their other passions and priorities. Are they really concerned after this past year about, you know, mental health, about their children, about their grandchildren? How have their priorities shifted in this last year? I think that's a fair question that you know, most people would feel comfortable answering, and that will tell you a lot. And then getting some understanding of their other charitable work and giving, and complimenting them on that. You know, people love to feel complimented and appreciated for their support. And then, of course, their connections to your organization. And in my case, especially, those connections happened long before me. So the previous CEO was with the organization for over 20 years. And so I was able to meet him early in my joining the organization. And so I'm able to tell these new donors, oh yes, I've met Julian and Leslie. They're still really involved in the garden. And so if they have a personal relationship with my CEO, previous CEO, I want them to know that everything is good there. He just retired and it's all right. And you know, you can still be friends with us even if Julian's not around. But having those knowledge of their own connections can be really helpful as well. All right, so as we're getting to think about setting up the meetings, and again, this is new times, right? We're the goal used to always be a face-to-face meeting, but right now face-to-face can also mean Zoom or porch visit or whatever they feel comfortable with. So, you know, first you want to think about your timing of your outreach. I generally do not send outreach emails or calls on Fridays because people are busy planning their weekend. If they're in business, they might have left early for the day. You're just not going to get a lot of response on Fridays. I will sometimes do follow-up calls or emails on Fridays with the note of, hey, let's touch base early next week. Oh, I'm sure you're busy. You know, I hope you have a great weekend. So let's try and set up a time, you know, on Tuesday if you're free. Having the understanding that people have and should have a work-life balance also shows that you're respectful of their time. So that's something to keep in mind. Choosing location. Meeting your donor where they're at has never meant more than now. So my outreach with my donors right now is to invite them into the garden with the note that it is an outdoor space and that we are vaccinated. I volunteer that information. We are not allowed to ask. I don't have to answer if they don't have to answer. Some of your organizations may have very strict rules about face-to-face meetings at this time. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But then I also offer, or I'm happy to set up a video call if you're not comfortable with in-person. And so I always give them the option. It is up to them how they feel comfortable meeting. And also that may have changed, you know, people's personalities have changed in the last year. I emailed with a previous board member to invite her into the garden because I know she lives nearby. And she is one of these people who had been to every event, every meeting, every coffee you ever invited her to. And she is still not seeing people. She is still not comfortable yet. And so I just said, well, okay, we'll just keep in touch via phone and email. And I hope you're doing well. And we've just been staying in touch that way. Some people may take a little more time to feel comfortable in their outreach and their connections. What we'll get to next is talking about gatekeepers, and historically that's been an office setup that also now can be a work from home situation, right? So the phone number that you have may be a landline in the house. You may be getting a spouse who is guarding their spouse's time, and you got to be okay with that. You got to know that it's not personal, that we all have a lot going on right now, and they're just doing right by their person, and then that's okay. But getting to know the gatekeepers really can help you in a lot of ways. And then just being clear and honest and open about who you are. And again, right now, that's why these new times are good. You can say, I'm not asking for a gift. I'm just wanting to get to know you. I want to get to know how you've been in the past year because we haven't been in touch. Wanted to get you to know, what we've been up to in the past year. Again, you're reigniting this relationship. So you have an excuse to reach out. This is a legitimate reason to reach out. And you can be very direct from the very beginning and say, this is not a solicitation call. I'm just looking to get back in touch. And that may open up not only the person, but also if you're dealing with a gatekeeper. So speaking of gatekeepers, and those of you who have the book, this is in the textbook as well. And the important thing of this, I think that all of these bullet points are true for any relationship, right? You want to be real. You want to be honest. You're building a relationship. You want to be clear and direct about who you are and why you're trying to connect with their person. But you also want to be kind, right? Say thank you. Know their name. Say their name. Thank you, Gloria. I know Tom's really busy right now. I'll send you an email, and when you think he has time on his schedule, just let me know. Again, keep things light, short, brief, and be patient. That is rule number 2, I think, in fundraising is knowing that everything's not going to be immediate. It's I was talking with Christine before this call. A major gift historically takes 18 to 24 months. So understand that you are building a long-term relationship that is a year plus in the making. So taking your time is okay. I will say that I have spoken to donors who have told me that other fundraisers were pushy or trying to pitch me immediately. Donors know what your job is and what you're doing. And even when they take your call, they want to build a relationship and take the time to get to know you. So coming off rushed and wanting to do a pitch immediately can also be a disservice to you and your organization. So again, patience is key. It's not one of my strong points either. So I have worked on that over the years as well. So once you do get to that phone call and that initial outreach, and this call, by the way, is just to get a face-to-face meeting, or in our cases now, just to get a video call or a porch visit. This is short and sweet. And again, for those of you who have the textbook, this is in chapter 8, and it goes into more detail about each step. But your goal here is really just to get the visit. And so it's about being as clear and confident as you can. And one of the first things that I always say is smile. I'm smiling right now as I'm talking to you guys, and it's helping me a whole lot in being positive and confident and being able to, introduce yourself and your organization. This is Lenise Andrade with the San Diego Botanic Garden, and I just wanted to reach out to you today to see about setting up a meeting. And then again, take the curse off the call. This will just be a few minutes. Is this a good time to talk? Do you have a couple of minutes? I won't take up too much of your time. Just being really honest and direct, the purpose of the call. I'm following up on a letter we sent. I just wanted to make sure you got that invite. And my tactic right now, I'm new to the garden and I just really want to get to know our longtime donors. Making an interest capturing statement, and that could be any number of things. It could be, it's been such a rough year. Last year, we were still able to impact, 5,000 students in the area. We still were able to serve 500 seniors. We maintained 60,000 memberships. Being able to have a certain data point or, warm story to share that's just a little glimpse into what you want to talk about later can really pique their interest and let them know that really is the purpose of your call. And then just set up an appointment, just say, don't want to take up too much of your time. Are you comfortable with an in-person meeting? I can set up a video call if you'd rather, I can, if you like, I can email you a couple of times that work for me and you can let me know what works for you. Really give them the opportunity to tell you which method they're most comfortable with. There are some people who are not phone people. There are some people who only deal in email. Some people, like I said, would rather text you. So let them be the lead. I was taught early on, you respond in the way your donor responds. So that can also be a good way for you to find out what they're most comfortable with. And then just, like I said, meet the donors where they're at. What are they most comfortable with? I'm also inviting donors into the garden when we're closed so that they can be outside with me and still, be there when there's not a crowd of people. And to be honest, a couple of our donors did this, and one of them, who is a doctor, came in still wearing a mask outside. So I kept my mask on outside. And this was just last month. So, and San Diego has good numbers, but that's how she's comfortable. So I kept my mask on the whole time, and we had a great conversation and talked for 2 hours. It was wonderful. But being respectful of where people at, I think, is key now more than ever. So just thinking of ways to connect, mostly in some cases, I don't always have a phone number. But I do have more emails, oddly enough, so I'll email to arrange a call. If I don't hear it back, then I set up a time then to send a note as a follow-up, or if I do have a phone number, then do a call and ask for a meeting time. You really are trying to be aware of everyone's schedules, and especially right now with people working from home, if people have other family members living with them now, if they are, even if they're retired, they may just not be going out yet. You just need to be comfortable with what every reaction you're going to get, and also just not to take it personally, and just keep trying. Don't give up. That's probably fundraising rule number 3. So then as you get into your approach, this is really about connecting with the donor for the first time and really setting a tone for your relationship. And, donors are different, just like the rest of us. And so there are people who are going to be more formal, some people who are going to be more jovial, some people who feel more comfortable with PG rated language, and some who absolutely don't. And so your first goal is really to try and get comfortable with them and who they are, and follow in kind, and really make sure that you're being respectful of who they are, and that you're setting a tone that really helps to build trust, because that really is also a huge part of this job. I have been honored with the things that donors have felt comfortable telling me. In 2008 and 9, when the economy was going to tank, it was during the recession, I dealt with 2 donors who were already retired, but who saw their 401k go down 75% in 6 months. And they shared that with me personally. And I don't think they had even told their own daughters that had happened. The wife was stressing about having to go back to work. She had recently retired. The husband, his field had gone away. He didn't know what he would do. But they were very open and honest with me because we had built that trust. And so obviously I wasn't able to ask them for a gift that year. But maintaining that trust made it able to talk to them about a gift the following year when they were able to rebuild. So again, it's just about setting a tone and setting a connection, and so that you have you're building a relationship for the future. So getting to know your donors starts from the beginning, right? Nail the greeting, be confident, smile, be yourself. I think that really is the key point. You know, in the book, I was looking at the notes and it says to shake hands. Not everyone's going to be comfortable shaking hands just yet. I've just been doing a little wave as, you know, if you're meeting in person, and if they reach out a hand and you feel comfortable reaching that hand, then do that. You know, really following their body language. If you're watching on a video call, do they seem distracted? Are they engaged? You know, I often will tell donor, well, if it's okay, I'm taking notes just so I remember what we talked about. You know, do they seem fine with that? You know, read the room, but more importantly, just really try and listen to them and listen to the things that they're telling you. And their names, remember the names. I have a very unusual name, and I love it when people remember my name and say it correctly and try to say it correctly. I actually just had this happen last night at a chamber mixer I went to. The guy read my name tag and he said, Lenise, am I saying that correctly? And I instantly smiled. And then as I was walking away, I was remembering that this was part of the presentation. And I just thought, oh, that just happened to me. And I completely felt honored that they remembered my name. And then one of the things that I do with donor visits, whether it's a phone call or a video call or in person, is I always use their name as soon as I meet them, try to remember to start off a sentence at some point in the conversation with their name. And then as we're leaving, you know, thank you, William, for coming in. This has been a really nice visit, and please contact me anytime with any questions you may have. So just using their name on a regular basis, not overly. I go for 3 or 4 throughout the visit just to try and keep it fresh, and knowing that you're not following a script, that you really are remembering who they are. And that really gives them an opportunity to be themselves. So Christine, I think we were going to talk about sharing first impression stories, some boosters and breakers.
Yes, we would love if you all could share some first impression boosters or breakers that you've experienced, or that maybe how you've heard stories of. If you could share these into the chat, we would love to know more. But yes, a big thing that I've heard a lot is names. And I know you mentioned before, Lenise, about nicknames, and knowing if your donor prefers those or not is a big sign of whether or not you are paying attention.
Right.
So that was a great example. But if anyone else has anything to share, please feel free to chat. Before we go into that, though, I do have one question that came in where they asked, because you did talk about a little bit about reaching out and being very clear that you're reaching out to learn a little bit more about them and get coffee or do Zoom. But one question was, what are your specific tips on overcoming resistance to this phone call or to this meeting?
Overcoming the resistance?
If they don't want to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did have one donor who did schedule a call time with me, or said, yes, go ahead and call me at this time. And then when I called, she basically said she didn't want to talk. And what she said, actually, and I kind of understood what she said. She said, you know, I'm old now. I'm living in this such and such facility, and I don't get out to the garden much anymore. So her point of view at that point seemed to be like, oh, I'm not worthy of your time. And that's what I heard in that moment. And so what I told her, I said, okay, Kathy, no problem. I understand. You know, I honestly just wanted to ask you questions about the garden, like the background. You know, I know you haven't been in recently, but you know, I just wanted to know more about the history. And next thing I know, we had a half-hour conversation. And by the end of the conversation, she was talking about, well, maybe my facility, do you guys have senior centers come in? And I said, well, does your facility have a shuttle? And she said, well, yes. And I said, okay, well, do you have a director there who does the event? Yes. Well, if you give her my name and phone number, we can talk about shuttles. The next thing I know, we're trying to plan a visit for the seniors to come in. Hesitancy often isn't about us. And I think that that's one thing that we tend to take it personally. And often it's the other way around. It's that donors feel like they're not worthy of our time. Oh, I'm not a big donor. I only gave you $500. I don't know why you want to talk to me. Or I've only been doing, I've only been giving you guys for 2 years, or I don't know any rich people. I'm not a rich person. And I think coming at it as to more of, here's a cause we both care about. Here's an organization we both think is doing a good job, and we wanted to see it do well and do better. If you come at the conversation with that framework, instead of, because they may have the impression that, again, that it's about money. And if you are more building a relationship with them around a cause that you and that person cares about, then they're going to be a little bit more open to the conversation. And persistence. And again, if you send a card, send a note, send an email, make another call, make another note. My previous boss years ago, at the zoo, at the San Diego Zoo, it took 2 years for her to get a note back from a guy that she was reaching out to. They just opened a $10 million facility with his name on it at the zoo. So persistence is important. And again, just don't take it personally. If you're reaching out to that person, you believe that there's a reason and that there's a connection. And in some cases, it just may take a little more time and different approaches till you find the right one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lenise. And to give people some more time to chat, we can just move on in the presentation. But again, if there's anyone in the audience that if you'd like to unmute, just feel free to raise your hand. And when we get to the open discussion, we can allow you to unmute so you can share.
All right, thanks. Move on. Okay, so giving donors the gift of being remembered. And again, this goes back to remembering their name and the correct pronunciation of their name. This is also now much more prevalent, also an awareness of pronouns, and people who are specific to their pronouns will let you know. And sometimes you can also ask, and having that in your signature line as a preferred pronouns is also a good opener for that conversation. And that's also showing a sign of respect of who they are and how they present. Being attentive to your donor when you're speaking with them, having really an understanding of who they are and what they care about, and associating their interests with your cause, observing their information, their body language, things that they have interest in, and repeating. I do repeating a lot, where I say, well, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying X, or, oh, it seems like you really have an interest in children and education. And then sometimes, you'll find out that they were a school teacher for several years, or they worked in this field, or, they really missed when their kids were little, and, now they're off to college, and they're missing that. So repeating these things and things that you notice about them shows that you actually are interested in them as people. And that's really huge, because donors often feel like an ATM, and that's the worst thing that you could make them feel like. You really need to recognize that they are people who happen to give, and that is a unique breed in this world. And that is important, and that is what makes, for me, my job interesting, because I'd much rather talk to people who are givers than those who aren't. So I want to make sure that they feel appreciated as often as possible. So here's some approaches that we can use when we're talking to donors about our case for support, our cause, and our programs and what we're doing. And this is also, for those of you who have the book, this is in the chapter. This is pages 204 and after. So the relevant benefit approaches is about the heart, and knowing that these are the care areas that really have are the meat of what they care about. So for the garden, for example, we have education programs, we have conservation programs, we have programs on site for kids, we do field trips, we do adult education courses, you know, and we have a beautiful botanic space, and we've led a ton of art exhibitions on site. So, you know, there's 7 areas of interest that any person could have. And so knowing what that person's heart of why they give is key. And so having that approach is one way to work with donors who are a little more heart-based in their work. Impact approach often is about numbers and how is your organization moving the needle, and or how is their gift impacting your work. So to be able to say, you know, Dawn, your gift helped us serve 500 seniors last summer during the pandemic. And I just wanted you to know how important that was, and just showing that their gift has impact and reach. Typically, the impact approach also works with a lot of people who have a business background and people who have built businesses or worked their way up themselves. So this is where you start getting into the psychology of the donor and why, and not only of what areas they give in, but how they give, and how the reporting what you giving back is important to them. Looking at curiosity, what are people interested in? What do they care about? And then one of the great tools that I love to use is to be, I say that I'm my organization's megaphone. So I need to know everything about my programs, so then I can amplify that program to that person. You know, so one of the things that I've been educating our donors about recently is the fact that we do a lot of conservation programs and restoration projects outside of the garden. And for people who didn't know that, but really care about the environment and native plants and habitats, you know, I can do one of those. Well, did you know we have 4 programs outside of the garden? And if you want, I can schedule a meeting with Tony, and, you know, we can do a site visit. You can come see, you know, the restoration program over by Escondido Creek, and, you know, work with us, you know, learn a little bit more about our work there. And so just getting there, piquing their curiosity, and having the information at your ready to let them, educate them about the programs that your organization does. Compliments. Everybody loves compliments, right? So the compliment approach is I think probably a little bit more useful if you're in a smaller town, because you're more likely to hear something like, Jim, I heard you got the CEO of the Year award from the local chamber. Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. You know, congratulations. So it's a little more awkward if you're in a big city and it's obvious that, you know, you Googled their name or that you have them on a Google alert. But just if there's a way that you could casually know that they recently won an award or were promoted or were featured in the paper, you know, and mentioning that's also a good, you know, opener or get to know you kind of area. And then again, the referrals. So a lot of our donors at the garden have definitely been connected through other people. And so being able to utilize those names, or in some names, even some talking to that referral person first. So I can legitimately say, oh, you know, I talked to Bob the other day and he reminded me that you are really interested in art. And I just want to let you know we have this really cool art exhibition starting in September, and I can send you some more information on that if you're interested. And again, these are just soft approaches, soft ways of engaging the donors into your programs a little bit more so that you can find out what their specific areas of interest are. And again, all of these approaches are ways of you letting them talk. And that really is the goal. And one of the things we talk about at the Fundraising Academy is that you don't really ask your way into a gift, you listen your way into a gift. I have a little stone I keep on my desk at all times, and it just says listen. And it is one of the things that has been my biggest learning tool and asset in the last 19 years I've been doing this, is just to shut up. I like to talk, as you may have seen by this presentation, and I enjoy talking about the programs that I'm involved in and I care about. But you will learn so much if you will just ask open-ended questions and listen to your donors and let them tell you what they care about. And then find ways to educate them about your programs and your initiatives and your plans, for sure. But also listen to the way that you are being engaged. What are the best ways to engage them in the work that's happening, and what your programs are that they can support. So listen. The next section we're just going to go into really briefly is need discovery, and this is the next part of the approach, and donor engagement before we get into actual presentation. And again, we're not even close to the ask yet, folks. We still got a couple more steps to go, but this is how you get to the core of what people care about. And so you're able to give people a much more directed ask. The analogy I think of all the time is God bless those cell phone algorithms, right? You happen to buy a baby blanket for someone on Amazon, and next thing you know, you're getting ads for all the baby blankets in the world, and you don't even have a kid, right? But they are smart. This is how that works. This is how that data mining works. And recently, I wanted to buy a plant stand. So I, on purpose, looked up a plant stand on Wayfair, and then ended up getting, 20 different ads across 4 different platforms of all these different plant stands that I could have for my office. So algorithms work. And much in that same way, our conversations with our donors are ways to fine tune what it is that our donor specific interests are, and then linking them to what our organization does and what our programs are doing and the impact they have on the community and our area and the people we serve. And so being able to fill out that process with need discovery and being able to drill down about their specific areas is really what's going to help us in as we get into doing completing a presentation or proposal and presenting that to them. So part of that, as we get more involved with our donors, is to really ask good questions. And so we're going to open-ended questions. We want to say, instead of have you given into this organization? How have you appreciated is your organization? These are all yes and no answers. We don't want yes or no answers. We want them to tell us their story, their own personal story. So instead you would say, I would love to hear more about why you give to our organization. I usually use, how did you get first involved with our organization? What was your first connection to our work and our programs? Something, that tells that their origin story, which they get excited about because they're remembering their first connection, their first event, that person that connected them. In one case, I met with this woman who, it was her spouse who was the gardener, and she had no interest in any of this. And now she volunteers with us 3 times a week. And he passed away several years ago. And this is her way to still be connected to him. And that was a very personal story she shared with me just because I asked, how did you get connected? So those questions can really mean a lot and give you a lot. How did this organization, make you feel special? I've been using, what's been your favorite moment of being part of the garden? What's one of your favorite memories of the past few years here? What event did you like best? What program is your favorite? And again, just letting them tell their own personal stories and connections. And then, yeah, what are your philanthropic priorities? You may not be their number one priority, and that's okay. But getting them to talk about the causes they care about and the things that they believe in really is another way to be connected to their organization. And again, there may be overlap. We do a lot of work in the arts and in conservation and in science, and most people wouldn't think that, walking onto beautiful grounds. We're not just poppies and eucalyptus. There's a lot more to be had there. And so if someone does have a background in arts and education and science, there is a lot more that we can talk to about them. So finding what are the other areas that there's overlap in your organization and their other philanthropic priorities. And I think we were going to do some time, Christine, for some more community sharing about personal questions.
Yes. Hi, Lenise. It's actually Pearl. I'm also with the Fundraising Academy. Thank you so much, Lenise and Christine. I'm excited to help us wrap up the presentation and move into our Q&A. But first, as Lenise mentioned, we would love if you take a few moments, perhaps to share any questions that you can ask your prospects and donors based on your organization, the priorities of your organization, and the relationships that you have with your donors. What we're going to do is please feel free to add that to the chat. We're going to continue so that we can get to the Q&A. So Lenise, do you want to wrap us up with the summary, and then we can start asking you some of the great questions that came in?
Sounds great. Thanks, Pearl. Okay, so to summarize, what we've been talking today about has all been about preparing all the steps that you prepare for before the actual ask. Again, the ask is just one step in our entire cycle of our relationship with the donor. And so preparation beforehand is essential. And that goes back to what's in your database, what information do you have on file, what do other staff members know about this person and your approach to them, and how can you use that information to get your face-to-face meeting? And again, that either is in person or Zoom, whatever they feel comfortable with. Meet your donors where they're at, literally, and just be prepared as much as you can for that initial conversation, and be yourself, be comfortable, know your stuff, and know that you know your stuff, and you'll be fine. Having the steps of the 6-step of telephone track can be helpful, again, for your confidence, and a script if you need it, bullet points if you use it, whatever tool works best for you. And again, just keep that smile and confidence going your entire time, and that will give a lot to your first initial impression and conversation with your donor. Making that deliberate first impression, and again, plan ahead. That goes back to knowing your organization's programs, the specific projects that you're doing, and also what's up the pipe. That's a big conversation we're having right now as we're rebuilding our team and being able to hire more people, and looking more towards 2022 than anything, and planting those seeds with our donors is a huge part of what we're doing right now, because this is still a transition year for most of us, right? And then asking thoughtful questions to really understand of what drives your donors' giving. And those are those open-ended questions, those heartfelt questions. You can plant seeds with impact statements and important, showing the general importance of the work that your programs are doing, but really spending most of the time listening and understanding that listening is your greatest asset, and making the donor feel comfortable enough to share and to trust you to listen.
All right, thank you. So a quick reminder to everyone to please submit any questions you have in the Q&A section in the Zoom control panel. As you are typing those up, we also have a friendly reminder that the slide deck and recording will be sent in the following days for you to review. So no worries if you missed a slide or there was something you wanted to go back to, you will get all of that in your inbox. All of our upcoming live webinars and a full list of on-demand videos are listed on our website. Please don't miss our next webinar on August 18th. It will be a panel discussion called Stories from the Field, Cause Chat with Black Fundraising Professionals. Side note that August is Black Philanthropy Month, so we're very excited to celebrate in many ways here at the Fundraising Academy in August. All right, let's begin our Q&A. I do have one question I wanted to start with, Lenise. Someone asked if you can give strategies to inquire on personal interests if a prospect or a donor is not open to a meeting but does give to your organization.
Ooh, so you're not getting the meeting, but you want to get more information?
Right.
Oh, that's a good one. I think with that, my tactic would be to look at that person's circle. So how are they connected to the organization? So in our database, we do have a connections tab. So I can see who that person is connected to within our organization and try and find a little bit more from the people who I know will tell me. So our board members, our committee members, our volunteers are all very forthcoming people. So if I knew that, you know, Bob Toledo gives $1,000 a year, and I've tried forever to get a hold of him, and he just will not, but he still keeps giving. I would still keep sending notes also too, just as an FYI, not so much for the face-to-face, but just for a you know, keeping me in front of mind as a contact, as their contact. And here's a good reason why. I did have a donor I worked with back when I was at the zoo, and he had been a $1,000 donor, which was our bare minimum for major gifts. I had sent him a, you know, welcome to the President's Club. Love to have you in for a tour. I think another email. I think it was a whole year at least of me sending him probably 3 or 4 things via email and card, I want to say. I randomly got a call from him in December because it came to find out that he had given to 3 organizations at the same time, also $1,000. The disease-related organization he gave to lost his check and did not even, it took him a month to even get it acknowledged and recognized and cashed. The second organization, a theater in town, immediately sent him an ask for another gift and didn't really give any, you know, besides the tax acknowledgement, no other informative information or personal connection. And so since I was the only organization that gave a personal connection, he wanted to give us $3,000. And I hadn't even met him yet. And then he was finally saying, oh, and I think my brother will be in town for Christmas, so we might want to do a tour then after all. But I just, again, it was me being persistent and still staying in touch. And even if they don't respond, that doesn't mean that you're not, you know, you're not touching them in some way, because he remembered that I was his personal contact for the zoo, whereas those 2 other organizations, he had no personal contact as far as he was concerned.
Great. All right. Going to our next question. How much of your time daily are you on the phone with your donors?
Ooh, not that much. Lately, I'm more email, and again, that's an assumption that I think we make about older donors not being email people, because I always offer to either call or email if we're not doing a video or in person. And most are emailing, or they email to arrange the visit. I think the calling I'm doing a little bit more with, we do memorial gifts, and that's a much more personal conversation if they want to dedicate a bench or a tree in honor of someone who's passed. And that's probably been maybe 15-20% of my week. I'm definitely much more email than phone. And that's a huge shift, though. I will say that when I was doing major gifts for the zoo 10 years ago, it was much more phone. So I think that just may be, a generational change.
Great. All right. We have some more questions coming in. Leanne asked, this is a great question. How has DEI /CCF informed your approach, if at all? I'm assuming, Leanne, you're talking about community-centric fundraising. I want to be sure I'm answering your question or presenting your question appropriately. While we wait, actually, Leanne may not be on anymore. If she is, Lenise, could you start? touching on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've definitely been involved in those conversations over the past year. I've attended several CCF, BIPOC only. I'm Latina. And again, I go back to being authentic and real and who I am. And so it generally comes up at some point in the first initial conversation. And Pearl and Christine know this also just from knowing me. I usually at some point early on mention that I'm from LA. And even though I've been in San Diego for 14 years, I'm still a Dodger fan. I come from a big Latina family in LA, born and raised, but don't think I'll ever move back. And so like that sharing of who I am as a person is important to me, and being able to be in an organization where that is supported is huge. We do have a diversity council internally, and we have a diversity statement that is beautiful and will shortly be coming out on our redesigned website. And it is important to us as an organization we've during Pride Month posted about LGBT leaders in horticulture and gardening over history, and really making it a point of pride of noting what the diversity statement basically says, that a garden is diversity. A garden is all the different pieces, living together and creating a beautiful space in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. And so really having that mentality has been huge for me in choosing to join this organization. So that makes me feel comfortable to present as I am with my donors. And since the organization leads that conversation, I think the donors know that. I think it's much harder for your organization that doesn't. And I recognize that. And I have been in those places, and it is hard. It is hard to feel like you are having to be in a box in order to present your organization. If there's ways that you can push that internally with the conversation of, my job is going to be easier if I can be authentic to who I am, because then a donor is going to feel more being able to be authentic to who they are to me, would be one way that I would, maybe broach that conversation with people you feel comfortable with. But it is hard. It is hard having that approach. And for the CCF comment, the community centric, I historically have presented more of to my donors, here is how your gift is affecting the community. Here's how it's affecting, how you are part of the solution. And so it's a little bit of a shift. One thing I do, and I believe in as a fundraiser too, is that we are led by our own programs, priorities, and strategic plan, not the donors. So I'm never going to present a proposal to a donor that is the donor's idea of what we should be doing next. It's always what is our plan and how does it align with the donor's interests. And so that is something that I feel that this is just my own opinion, arts and museums are playing catch up on, because they historically have kind of listened to donors more so than the other way around. But hopefully we're recognizing, we're professionals in this field. We were chosen in these roles for a reason. And my CEOs and my leadership, they are PhDs in this area and have, decades of experience. And so they are the ones to lead our organization to the next level. And so it is okay to be honest with donors about that, and to have gift policies that express that, and to be clear in our conversations. And so I think that also is helpful in terms of just having real specific guidelines within your organization of what we will and will not accept.
We have great questions coming in. I am sorry we won't be able to get to all of them, but I'll move straight into our next question. How do you ask for funding money that gives to the same cause?
It gives to the same cost. I'm not sure I understand that.
Oh, cause. I'm wondering if my understanding, and if you ask this question are still on, please feel free to add to the chat more information. My understanding was perhaps what seems like competing money if that donor is giving to another organization with the same cause. My understanding was, how do you perhaps get that donor to have an interest in you as well.
Yeah, so like they give to another garden, but why would they give to mine?
Right.
Yeah,
That's my understanding. I hope I'm understanding this question correctly.
Yeah, so I would say that regardless if your organizations are similar to something else, you are doing something differently. And that is really your job, is to be able to figure out how is your organization addressing an issue uniquely? Is it serving a different community? Is it serving a different age range? Is it doing a different program than another organization? You know, being able to show how your organization is uniquely qualified to address this issue. And, you know, I know tons of donors who give to several environmental organizations, and it's because they see that each organization is serving a different part of the environment, you know, pie, so to speak. Are you serving youth? Are you serving coastal? Are you serving, you know, land management? You know, we're all doing it in different ways. So really figuring out a way that you can differentiate yourself from the other organizations nearby.
Wonderful. All right, let's see what we have here. We do have a question. So this person who asked this question, they are struggling to prioritize their donor list. They have 2,000 annual donors and need a list of 200 to provide a personalized experience for. So the question is, what is a practical way to prioritize among new donors, lapsed, consecutive year donors, 3+ years, and monthly donors?
Oh, geez.
So perhaps a more broad answer. In general, if you are doing this, how might you approach how to prioritize these donors?
Absolutely. And oh my goodness, whoever this person is, I feel you. First of all, I will tell you frankly, your list is too large. It is not realistic to ask someone to have a 200-person list. And that's just me being blunt to the room. So if that's not something you can feel comfortable saying to your leadership, I totally get it and understand and have been there. So there's a way of doing it. I usually do it in thirds. So we had talked sort of like an A, B, and C group. If you can figure out like you're spending most of your time with your top third people, and that's, you know, touching them at least once a month, if not more, depending on how much the, you know, activity that you can trigger for the next step and the next step and the next step. Your middle people may be every other month, or maybe every, you know, 2 months, 3 months. And then the last bunch is, you know, twice a year, quarterly. And then also maybe like softer touches, like, you know, you're just sending them the same generic email. Like, you know, that you have an exhibition opening in September. So all of your people are going to get, you know, a personal email the month before about the exhibition, but it's your C-level people are only, that's going to be the only other touch they get from you, you know, throughout the year. So that it's just, and also making sure that your B and C level people are also getting automated things from are they on your email newsletter? Are they getting your regular mailings? Are they getting invites to events? Your C-level people might not necessarily pull in the donor pool, but make sure that they still get invited to the events, even if they don't financially, that currently, like if they haven't given recently, that they may not pull for the invite list, but they're on your list for a reason. So you need to make sure that they're getting some personal touches. But yeah, I always see it as an actual calendar year. And so that's also why I calendar what is my organization doing throughout the year that's not a fundraising event? What other events can I share with my donors? And in some cases, it's, you know, it may only take you like a day or two to go through your C-level people of just literally forwarding that email. Like, hey, Sally, not sure if you noticed or if you got this, but just wanted to make sure that you heard about X event that we have coming up. Or, you know, I know you have kids or grandkids in the house now, and we've got a children's concert, you know, come in next month. And so being able to find ways to reach out that's easier than the more time-consuming personal interaction you're going to have with your A group.
Great. Okay, we have time for one last question. This question is more around prospecting. Do you suggest having a CRM or standalone software application that is specific for prospecting?
Oh, okay. So I'm vetting wealth screening platforms right now. So I just know, like, realistically, it would be great if you could have a Wealth Engine or Donor Search or any of those platforms, but they are expensive and they're built to also have a full-time person maintain it. And so if that is not realistic for the size of your staff or the size of your budget, then just know that and just try and grow towards that. Meanwhile, you can do a lot of just pulling your own lists. Like I said, pull 5 years back, pull not only annual gift, but cumulative giving, pull for longevity. If there's a way to look at, here's the last 10 years and who's even the biggest donors, even those ones that have lapsed for the last 5, those people gave to you steadily for several years. And so you meant something to them at one point. Trying to re-engage them is worth a phone call or an email or some sort of outreach. You've got a stack of annual reports that are in your office because you didn't have enough people to send them to last year. To set up just a one-time mailing of, hey, we missed you, or hey, I'm new, and we know 2020 was a lot, just wanted to make sure you got this, and no, we're still here, we're still thriving, and we'd love to have you come back and see what we're up to. Keeping those things short and sweet, having a four sentence note that you write to the same 20 people, and you'll never know what you're going to get out of those, but really trying to reach out to the people that were already connected to you, and that you can see have some kind of capacity. If you see a spike in giving, that's another prospect that becomes a prospect tool. If you see that they've moved recently and all of a sudden it's a better zip code than they lived in before, these are all things that you can just within your own database without doing any paying for a platform. And again, if you have someone on the ticketing side, if you're an organization that has a space that has events, like I said, if they're able to pull people who register for things just by zip code, if they know how to do that, then those people can you can teach them what I call light internet research of looking up addresses through Zillow for value of real estate, looking up names through Forbes for, are they VPs, are they in leadership in the community, do they give to other organizations? A lot can just be found in the regular internet, but it does require someone's dedicated time, either yours or someone else on staff. So that's just something to consider. Is it's worth the time, but you have to have an honest conversation with your leadership that we need to make the time if we're not buying a platform.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for your participation in our discussion. It was really great to also see participants sharing tips through the chat with each other. So I hope you all got a lot from that. We're going to move on. Lenise, thank you so much for taking the time to present and share your experience with us. If you'd like to contact Lenise, her contact information will appear in just a moment on the screen. And as a reminder, you will also receive this information within the recording and slide deck. Oh, looks like we don't have your information on there. We will include it in the slide deck and be sure it gets to everyone in the next few days in your emails. To help us continue to improve our monthly webinar series and ensure we are providing value to our audience, please take a few minutes to complete our survey. It will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. Again, thank you all so much for your participation. We hope you are all safe and healthy. Have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of the week. And thank you so much for all you do to better the communities in which we live, work, and play. Thank you.